Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. As you now know, there's a new branch of government in America. It's a fourth branch that has legislative power, even though you never elected them. And it's because they elected themselves. And the new branch's name is the Center for Disease Control. So it's the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and now the public health agency branch. And you didn't vote for this. You didn't consent to it. But this is the new America in which you're living. Among the powers the new fourth branch of government has given itself is the power to say who has to pay rent, who gets stiffed. And two times now, the CDC have gone rogue and simply said, hey, everybody, you don't owe rent anymore. And hey, you middle-class landlords who maybe own a rental property or two, go pound sand. Make your payment to the big banks anyway. And if you go broke, too bad. And you're probably white, rich, and everything else, every other stereotype, which means you didn't earn any of this anyway. Well, except that's not true. See, the CDC discovered that it can go way beyond its mandate. And they do this by ramping up fear and then making policy in the name of safety, whether it actually has anything to do with safety, science, or the law. And now the CDC, that's supposed to be an apolitical taxpayer-funded agency, has clearly been captured by Marxists, and now they want to come after your guns. And they want to do this by declaring that gun violence is a quote-unquote public health emergency, all for the purpose of regulating firearm ownership. Everything can be a public health emergency if you want to control it. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky told CNN just in August that it was time to do something. Watch.
I swore to the president and to this country that I would protect your health. This is clearly one of those moments, one of those issues that is harming America's health. My job is to understand and evaluate the problem, to understand the scope of the problem, to understand why this happens and what are the things that can make it better, to research that, to scale that up, to evaluate it, and to make sure that we can integrate it into communities. We have a lot of work to do in every single one of those areas because we haven't done a lot of work as a nation in almost any of them.
Yeah, guess what their work includes? Yeah, they always say do something, but the something includes funding just pro-gun control studies. Now, the CDC and the National Institutes of Health, they're funding new research on firearms to help, quote-unquote, reduce firearm-related injuries, death, crime, and suicides. And among several other research projects, they're apparently now going to provide funding to 10 state health departments, and they will start collecting data in near real time on emergency room non-fatal firearm injuries. And they say that it will allow doctors and epidemiologists to, quote, identify trends and craft swift interventions. Swift interventions. Remember, this is the science crowd. Now, we all know what they say when they say follow the science, what that means. It means do what we tell you to do. And they appeal to their own authority, so you can't ask questions because they're the CDC. They're not asking, they're issuing an edict. And they use the word science. It's a rubber stamp that otherwise they wouldn't. I mean, really, it's the administration bypassing the legislative branch and doing everything through the CDC because magical public health emergency. That's what's exactly going on. Now, here's the thing. Democrats love to claim that the CDC was barred from research of gun violence by pro-Second Amendment groups. Except this is a lie. They've said this over and over again. I've heard it for the past, 8 years now, except it's a lie. State-run and funded media outlet NPR tweeted out the lie anyway, and they said, quote, for decades, the gun lobby and GOP allies have effectively blocked federal funding for firearm research, creating a tangled mess of unreliable data that obscures the true toll of firearm injuries. And these stories shed light on this. So they did this their whole thing. They set it all up with, so far, the CDC has not at all been able to study anything related to firearms. And this was repeated by a number of Democrats, including Representative Marie Newman, who also tweeted out the same lie because they apparently have no idea what is law and what isn't. She tweeted, for decades, the gun lobby has prevented the CDC from studying gun violence. Now under POTUS, we can finally address it for what it is, a public health crisis, end quote. Except it's not. It's a criminal issue, but more on that in a minute. The truth is that the CDC was never barred from researching gun violence in the first place. So back in 1996, during the battle over an omnibus bill, there was a provision that was called the Dickey Amendment that was slipped into this omnibus bill, and it barred the use of taxpayer dollars to advocate for or against gun control. The language was precise. Here's the language. It stated, quote, that none of the funds made available for injury prevention and control at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention may be used to advocate or promote gun control, end quote. So it's pretty crystal clear, advocate for. It's pretty crystal clear. So what's going on here? the left wants to politicize science and try to restrict firearms using your and my tax dollars to do so. And they want to lie and say they were prohibited from doing so and say that they were barred from researching anything related to firearms. All the law prohibited was using your taxpayer dollars to fund and advocate for gun control. Now, here's the thing. The CDC could have studied something that's actually a little bit, that actually would matter. Like, for instance, the benefits of the family unit and curtailing juvenile crime, or maybe the mental health value of having fathers in the home, but they didn't do any of that. They don't do any of that because that would actually go towards the narrative that they want to work against, which is that matters in the home. No, government raising your kids. Now, here's the thing. They want to use this to restrict your firearms. So in any case, the CDC chose to not conduct at all whatsoever any firearms related studies, and they stifled their own research so as to promote gun control with these pro-gun control studies. They destroyed their own gun control narrative in the 90s, by the way, when they found that lawful defensive gun usage vastly outmeasured criminal usage. And in a recent study from 2008 that was commissioned under Obama-Biden, you know what they found? That almost all national survey estimates indicated that defensive gun uses by victims are at least as common as offensive uses by criminals, with estimates of annual usages ranging from about 500,000 to more than 3 million in the context of about 300,000 violent crimes involving firearms in 2008. And this, by the way, was also confirmed by a number of criminal researchers, including some who are not at all Republican or conservative. So the CDC decided to sit on this. They actually, back in the 90s, when they were studying the same thing that challenged the pro-2A and the self-defense narrative, what they actually did was sit on it and they never published it. And they didn't really make a lot of hay out of this either. Now, the CDC doesn't like to report these findings because it contradicts the narrative. Now, remember, the CDC, they're using politics as science, and this is further evidenced by one of their top officials, Mark Rosenberg. He was the director of National Center for Injury Prevention under the CDC at the time. Now he's president and CEO of the Task Force for Global Health. Now, in the 90s, he laid all his cards on the table for his plans to treat guns as a public health crisis. He said, quote, "We need to revolutionize the way that we look at guns, like what we did with cigarettes. It used to be that smoking was a glamour symbol, cool, sexy, and macho, and now it's dirty, deadly, and banned," end quote. They wanted to Joe Camel firearms. I wrote about this in my first book. So the folks on the left, including health agencies like the CDC, they've dreamed of making the Second Amendment a health issue so they can ban it and regulate it like cigarettes, right? You don't have a constitutional right to burying cigarettes. But there's more. When it was discovered that the CDC inflated firearm fatality numbers to boost their narrative, they actually dragged their feet for 2 years before finally correcting it. You're not surprised. I mean, it's the follow the science CDC. They only care about their far-left ideological agendas and how the CDC can advance them. And as you probably know, they were recently caught misrepresenting the child fatality coronavirus rate. And in response, the Wall Street Journal and Johns Hopkins publicly vetted and corrected their figures. The fact is this is all politics. It's not science. But if you can turn the gun debate into a science debate, then you can bring the busybodies over at the CDC in, right? Soon, if they get their way, we could have gloom and doomers like Rochelle Walensky telling us that she has very bad feelings about AR-15s because they look scary, so they should be banned. And as we all know, I mentioned this earlier, the gun violence problem, that's not a health issue. It's a criminal issue. It's an issue of repeat offenders who drive up homicide rates with illegally possessed firearms used in the commission of other crimes. I have spoken about this. I have written about this extensively for years. The simple truth is the CDC wants to step outside of disease control and use its federal authority and abuse it to falsely present a medical need to restrict firearm ownership, just as the CDC involved itself in state-regulated lease agreements for the sake of health. And they have a reason to think that they'll be successful in doing this. The CDC has gotten Americans accustomed to having their natural rights restricted in the name of a false sense of safety. And think about how, in the name of their safety, all of America has literally transformed in the span of what? Just a year? Well, 18 months maybe? Because the safety. The government can inject you against your will. Because of safety, the government can coerce private corporations into taking away your livelihood and ability to feed your children. Because of safety, perfectly healthy young people are treated the same as high-risk people with a number of comorbidities in their 80s until they must take regular injections and wear a mask anytime they're around people. Because of safety, you can't walk into a bar in New York. Safety may also be why, at some point, you can't even get on a plane. Apparently, that's on the table for discussion next. Safety may also be a pretext for tracking your movement and forcing you to show your papers and declare your private health information to total strangers. Point is, With enough fear, safety can be the reason to strip you of all of your liberties. Federal and state governments are corrupting the definition of public health threat as a mechanism to collect more and more power, while people watch their rights disappear. And don't underestimate the power of health agencies to change society while hiding behind the quasi-religious mantra of follow the science. You know how powerful these health agencies are? Not only can they tell people that they don't have to pay their rent, it turns out they can erase women in the name of science. Now, that's real power. Check out a recent tweet and infographic from the Follow the Science CDC. They say, quote, pregnant people with symptomatic COVID have 70% increased risk of death. Pregnant people. Pregnant people. What are pregnant people? It's not a typo. They said it twice. They've said this repeatedly in numerous articles and interviews. Apparently, the Follow the Science CDC doesn't believe that only women get pregnant anymore. Apparently, they believe that men can get pregnant too. Boy, that's going to be a fun conversation. And they wonder why people are tuning them out when it comes to vaccines. I'm not going to listen to anybody tell me anything about a vaccine if you can't even say women. It's all very scientific, you see. CDC is nothing more than an agency of flat-earthing witch doctors who think that women don't exist, that rental agreements are and recidivism are healthcare. They don't actually follow science anymore because they've been captured by the left. Their religion is politics. Defund them. Coming up, you've heard a lot about employees pushing back against vaccine mandates in order to keep their jobs. But what about business owners who don't want to force those employees? Tennessee State Senator and attorney on this issue, Brian Kelsey, joins me next to discuss. Keep it here. Thanks to Biden's economic policies, job numbers have been abysmal and inflation is skyrocketing. Instead of following the previous president's pro-business agenda that had the economy booming, the current president wants to tax corporations and pass trillion-dollar bills that nobody can pay for. So it's time to take proactive steps and protect your wealth in retirement by investing in gold and precious metals. And Legacy Precious Metals can help. Washington keeps printing money to pay for our outrageous bills, but all that does is devalue your dollar. Gold offers you a hedge against inflation, and as the dollar gets weaker, gold gets stronger. So the folks at Legacy Precious Metals, that's the gold standard when it comes to investing in precious metals, and they have a team of experts who can counsel you on the best options for you and your family. Don't leave your retirement to chance. Call Legacy Precious Metals at 866-580-2088 or visit them online to download their free investor's guide full of useful information. LegacyPMinvestments.com. So as I just laid out, YouTube is now banning accounts that has whatever they consider vaccine misinformation to be included. And get this, LinkedIn now corporately censoring profiles of U.S. journalists. Anybody who's critical of the CCP, anyone who doesn't toe the line, they're being censored if their accounts aren't outright being suspended. I have to say, I was actually kind of shocked that they even had LinkedIn available in China since they don't have anything else. Joining us to discuss all of this, FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr. Commissioner, always so good to see you. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be back with you. Thanks.
Of course. So let me start off. I wanted to get your opinion on the YouTube thing. And I get, there's a huge conversation on the right where it's private companies can do what private companies will, but it's changed dramatically since you had the White House spokesperson state that the administration is interested in marking certain things that they consider disinformation or misinformation, which varies wildly depending upon whom you ask, which I think is a huge problem. But with YouTube doing this, there's a lot of questions that are coming up with this, not just with people's ability to speak freely, because I think we get into the corporate censorship area, but also when there's the election, et cetera. There's a lot of worries here. And I just wanted to get sort of how you weigh in on that particular issue that YouTube announced this week.
Well, I'll start somewhere I didn't expect to start, which is praise for the New York Times, not the New York Times of today, unfortunately, the New York Times of 50 years ago. There was an editor, John Oates, and he said back then that diversity of opinion is the lifeblood of democracy. The moment we insist that everybody think the way we do, our democratic way of life is in trouble. And he was right. And underlying what he said is a culture in this country that will defend the right of other people to speak, even if we disagree with their content. Now, we've moved away from that in this country. And a lot of people have said it's none of the government's business. Who is the government to tell a big corporation what speech to carry and what not? And I would say this: we've never had private institutions with this much control, with this level of a lack of accountability. And to your point, when the White House comes out and says, actually, we're coordinating behind the scenes to help censor information, that crosses a line that makes it look like state action. And yeah, it is the government's business what type of censorship is going on at the direction of White House officials.
Yeah, and it's troubling too, because everyone always says, "Well, just create your own platform if you dislike this." Well, we see what happens when you do that. It can be canceled through it's like a web of services, Amazon Web Services, for instance, but a web of other services, and they can all kind of work together and deplatform like they did with Parler. It's troubling because it does seem like the public square is under attack, and at the same time, you have individuals like myself and many others that want to approach rectifying this issue with as minimal government intervention as possible. But it seems like now, because you have these corporations acting as essential agents of the state, I'm not really sure how much that government action can be limited. And it's sort of like a catch-22 here. So what is the solution?
Well, again, I think big tech has said that there's no role for the government here, that the First Amendment doesn't allow it to play any role with respect to their content moderation decisions. And I don't think that's right. I think there's a balance we can strike here. I think we can go too far. I think if we said, look, you have to carry every single piece of content, all speech, basically turn them into common carriers, that's not the position I'm taking. But we do have anti-discrimination rules on the books that prohibit people, for say in restaurants, from kicking people out based on their political affiliations. I think we can import some of those basic anti-discrimination rules to big tech without saying you got to carry child porn and you got to carry all kinds of information we don't want to carry. But poor political speech could be out there as something that we protect. Because look, we're the poorer from it. Right now, we can't discuss the potential origins of COVID-19, one of the most significant pandemics in the history of man, without getting censored. You can't search for Tank Man in the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre on Microsoft. There's all kinds of evidence. Obviously, the Hunter Biden story got spiked on social media. Our debate of these important public issues is poorer because of the censorship. So I do think there's a role for the government to come in with some basic guardrails that can help promote more speech.
Yeah, and you raise a good point too, because you can go too far, which absolutely you never want. More speech is people who dislike certain speech, the answer to that is more speech. And I agree with you too about stuff that which is definitely not considered protected speech, and some of it's actually quite criminal. You bring up a couple of really good points there too, because the Tank Man and Microsoft and how you can't find certain things. For instance, and this just happened to me yesterday, went because I was using this as part of radio show prep and was looking for this write-up. It was a great write-up on Dr. Anthony Fauci and what he had said previously on masks and sort of his progression on the mask position. Well, the link had changed in my saved notes. And when you go and search for it on Google and put it in, the link was broken, so I had to put it in a different way. Google did not want to recognize it. So buried like on page 7 after all of this other very, very happy pro-Biden mandate stuff was that link. But you put it in on any other search engine, and interestingly enough, it was coming right up. There was no problem. So when it gets to the point of these entities that are actually shaping public opinion, that's a little bit different. But I realize that we're in a brave new world. We've never had to deal with this kind of stuff. And this is where technology has kind of fast tracked us to have that healthy ratio between, smaller government, being able to engage in free speech while at the same time not allowing corporate interests to dictate where that goes. You have a hard job. I don't envy you.
Well, you're right. And it's very Orwellian. And the fact is this: truth does not drop down from the heavens like some sort of manna. Truth is decided by people that are either merely fallible or biased. And like you said, wear masks, don't wear masks. Wear 1 mask, wear 3 masks. This goes back and forth. That's why we should always err on the side of getting more information out there. And I think that is going to serve all of us a lot better than, controlling and censoring information. I mean, look, what is blasphemous today becomes orthodox tomorrow. That's the process of discovery. And so that's why we need a robust, open debate. And there's a role for the government here, given how much control big tech has over these channels of communication.
It's weird to watch all of this and then also simultaneously what's happening, for instance, with Hong Kong and with communist China. I know you had been talking about this. You were tweeting about it as well. I have to say, I was shocked that LinkedIn was still even allowed in China. I didn't even know that, because you can post on LinkedIn. I didn't know that they even allowed it, because they banned Facebook and Twitter and everything else. They have their own versions. But the CCP leaders can get on, obviously, as you know. But in LinkedIn, and you had tweeted about this as well, they're now censoring, working as a censor on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. I was reading one journalist who said, I woke up this morning to discover that LinkedIn had blocked my profile in China. I used to have to wait for Chinese government censors or censors employed by the Chinese companies in China to do this kind of thing. Now a U.S. company is paying its own employees to censor Americans. What is your reaction to this?
Yeah, this is disturbing. This is just the latest trend. But on LinkedIn, you have something in your profile that the censors in communist China don't like, and LinkedIn will go in for you and edit out that information for the communist regime. And the hypocrisy here is what's stunning. We have these companies based in Silicon Valley that have no problem lecturing the rest of this country what our values should be. But the second it comes to turning a buck in another country, all those values go out the window, and they are happy to censor.
Yeah, very happy to censor as well. Last quick question for you, Commissioner, and we appreciate your time with us today. The very interesting developments with the spy with Huawei, who ended up being released by Canada, now going back to China. Of course, that was a big PR boon for the Communist Party of China. With this administration, do we have to worry about, because I know that they have had certain agreements with a business deal. The Biden administration had greenlit a business deal already that sort of gets into this with China. But are we going to have to fight this again? Are we going to have to fight off the involvement of Huawei in our 5G and worry about the spy network here? I know they were trying to do it elsewhere. The previous administration was very successful in preventing that from taking place, taking root. Just your thoughts on the latest.
Well, we cannot afford any backsliding when it comes to our policy to China. I'd say the last 3 or 4 years were the first time that we ever showed the strength and resolve needed to stand up to that threat. Huawei, at the end of the day, is spy gear, and that equipment had been scattered through our networks across the country. We're now funding efforts at the FCC to rip that gear out and replace it with secure network hardware. And that's important. We can't go backwards to a time in which this equipment was just freely inserted into the network. We need to go beyond that. There's equipment authorizations that we're still approving in this country for Huawei gear. I've called on the FCC to end that. We have a proceeding underway to do it, but we cannot backslide and go back to the pre-2017, 2016 approach to communist China.
Yeah, I can't at all. FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr, so appreciate you, sir. Thank you so much for your time. And I do have it still on record, this is from radio. I have my one get out of jail free card, and I'm saving it. I have not needed to use it. But I'm just saying, I want everybody to know it was given to me by the commissioner. So thank you, sir. Good to see you.
Thanks. Embarrassingly enough, I actually got bleeped on a radio program the other day. So
I saw that. Okay, this is my last question. So who watches The Watchmen, Commissioner? So what happens there?
That's a very good question. I might have to recuse if that one comes up.
Good to see you. Thanks so much.
Good to see you. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, folks, coming up is civil discourse. What happened to civil discourse? And also, have you seen everything that's been happening, the encroachment of liberty, et cetera, et cetera? We get a lot to discuss with friend, attorney, and senior columnist for Town Hall, Kurt Schlichter. He joins me next to discuss. Stay with us. How much equity do you have in your home? Cybercrime experts are alerting homeowners that the more equity they have, the greater the chance criminals could target them. Home title theft is one of the fastest growing crimes, and Home Title Lock, America's leader in home title protection, is warning homeowners that they could potentially be victims and not know it. So cyber thieves can search hundreds of public databases for high equity homes. They can find your home's online title, forge your signature stating that you sold your home, take out loans with your equity. Insurance or common identity theft programs, not going to cover you. So protect your most valuable asset. Register your address to see if you could potentially be a victim and receive a complete title history of your home at $100 value for free. Visit HometitleLock.com. She immigrated from a communist country, China, 33 years ago, and is growing incredibly concerned by what she sees now happening here in America. This is crazy. Lily Tang Williams is a co-chair of the New Hampshire Asian American Coalition. She joins us now. Lily, welcome. It's good to see you. I know a lot of people got to hear you when you were speaking out about a lot of the critical race theory stuff. And really, I mean, what you said about the Cultural Revolution, Mao's Cultural Revolution, and some of the stuff that we've been seeing here, I think for the first time, people really began looking at it through that perspective and really seeing what all of this stuff actually meant after some of the remarks that you've had about CRT and other people have had about CRT. I mean, it's true. Talk a little bit about your perspective, like what you see happening here, whether it's education and, of course, top-down federal mandates, to your experiences when you were growing up in China, and now you see, sadly, that the same stuff is happening in the U.S.
Right, and the immigrants like me who fled communist and the socialist countries, some might be not speaking up yet because they have all kinds of worries and concerns about today's current cancel culture. That's why it's so sad about it. You are entitled to your free thoughts and free opinions and freedom of speech in a free country, but people have to worry about those things they care about. And I recognize this since last year. I have been warning people about this bigger and bigger authoritarian government and socialist risk, talking points and rhetorics for a while in this country. But the last year, I really just couldn't sleep because I saw the signs on the wall, and I saw all this division of the people, of the institutions, cancel culture, social justice movement, all just remind me what I went through in China by growing up under Mao's regime, went through 10 years cultural revolution.
Wow. Talking with Lily Tang Williams, and Lily, I mean, I think that's it's a powerful story, because a lot of people who never had to endure that, it's one thing to live through it and see it firsthand, and it's another thing to read about it in history books and read different historical accounts. But I think that distance makes them not actually aware of the beginning stages of it when they see it, when it starts happening in their own country. I was reading something that you had wrote just about school children. And as you were saying, the social justice warriorism, and we see that so much with education today. And that's incredibly concerning, because from what you had written, from the things that you've said before, that's exactly what they were doing to kids in China with Mao. That's exactly what they were doing. That's terrifying.
Well, they're doing to the children today more than China as the second largest economy. Now they wanted them to study, not Chairman Mao anymore, Chairman Xi's thoughts, little red app, and journalists have to be censored, state licensed, churches have to be state licensed. I found out the people in this country, they just really don't learn that much history and don't understand China. Of course, China is a big country, very complex historical, political, background and systems. So it is my job, because I lived there for 24 years. It is my job to learn about America, then see the similarities and educate people what could happen here, how fast you could lose your freedom, your property rights, your privacy, your parental rights. And just look at during the COVID shutdowns, the pandemic, how many people were told, you cannot do anything, you stay home, and your business closed, you cannot open, or you lose your license, and you must do this, you must do that. And our people complied due to fear, due to all the public goods and all that stuff that another side was talking about. I have seen things just getting worse and worse. And American people, lots of good people welcomed me when I first came to this country. They were demonized because of all this rhetorics and divide and conquer, social justice, critical race theory. And, if you were a white male today, lots of them, they cannot speak up. You were just being labeled racist. And it's so sad for me to say how Americans today are so divided, and they cannot have a civil conversation with each other when it comes to movies, art, music, comedies. They all have to be self-censored. Look at what's happening to Bill Maher, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Talking with Lily Tang Williams. Lily, you made a point earlier that I think is incredibly important, because there are people who immigrated to the country, became American citizens, know the dangers of communism firsthand, and a lot of them are afraid to speak up because, as you said, because of the cancel culture. And in my town, there was, a father from Vietnam, has a successful business, was initially worried about it, and then realized, oh my gosh, this is serious, and if we don't stop this now in its infancy, then it's going to get a lot worse, and then maybe we won't have the ability to speak out about this. Talk to us a little bit about that, because it's weird to see people on the left and people who think that this is completely fine always yell about appropriation with everything else, but that doesn't seem to bother them when it comes from these testimonies come from people who lived through communism, who experienced it. Suddenly, their real life lived experiences don't matter, which I find astounding. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that people got to understand, to learn history. I know our kids are not taught real history. I've been going to, kids to teach them. They really don't know. They think all those rhetoric sounds wonderful. Socialism, social justice sounds wonderful. But they don't understand when you totally rely on government and to provide your welfare state, to have higher taxes, then, you become very vulnerable. They can also take everything away. Socialism tried in all over the world. It always ended up to be people were equally poor and equally enslaved, and one political class, ruling class, they have all the power. So, so I think this critical race theory, that's why it scares me, is people just don't see the similarities. And last year, what happened? So-called use race, theory to justify looting, burning, and changing names, and defund the police, and the mafia-dominated state, violence-dominated state use race, skin color to divide people. In China, we use class to divide people. It's just very scary because it's the same tactics to divide people and then conquer and fundamentally transform America. This cultural revolution is happening. That's why immigrants like me who went through the first hand, we saw the writing on the wall. We feel very terrified and scared. That's why I'm getting immigrants who fled those countries be brave enough to come out, tell the truth, and trying to talk to our fellow citizens. Maybe they will listen to our first-hand experience and to wake up, to activate. Just voting is not enough, and some still don't even turn out to vote. And we're gonna lose this country if we keep going down this path. I'm very scared. We have no place to go. We're living American dream, come to this country with nothing. So what do? We need to be brave and speak up now.
Amen. And thank heavens that you're doing it. Thank heavens that people like you, Lily, are doing this. Before I let you go, I know you had said to my producer that we had met before in Colorado. When was that? Because I know you. I'm horrible with names, but faces I remember.
Well, you were busy and you had a book, and you were our speaker at the leadership program, the Rockies. And
I remember this now, yes.
I was 2025, one of the graduates out of 60 students or something like that. And you were there, we had a picture taking. I was still learning about my new country's political system and how to, and get to know our own history and how to persuade people. I think we all should not demonize our fellow citizens, or doesn't matter which party. Let's have a conversation, because most people in the middle, they're our own Americans. So why not have a conversation? Why not reach out to each other? Sit down, talk. So I'm all for that. If Democrats want to invite me to go to talk to their organizations, I would love to. I
think they might be scared of you. I think they might be scared of you, because I think the people that are in favor of that big statism, they're terrified of you because you're able to cut through it, and they know that you have the.
I had to eat red meat to survive in China, so I said AOC, Bernie, and
you had to eat rat meat to survive. I've heard stories like this. See, it's those stories like that you never ever hear discussed on CNN or MSNBC. Nothing like that.
And the thing is, though, people who don't know what true poverty is, what the true oppression is, what the true in slavery is about, then they want to talk about here in the media all the time. But for example, I would love to go to reach out to CNN, MSNBC, allow to have some time to talk to them about our own stories. And we are not oppressed in this country. We live in American dream. We love this country. America is a beautiful land of opportunity, and we come here with nothing, and we are living very comfortably as middle class. Why demonize this country? There are many immigrants still want to come.
And if everyone in America could fight as hard as you do, Lily, for it, this wouldn't even be a question. But you're doing the heavy lifting that some people who've been born here don't do. So thank you for that. Lily Tang Williams, it's a pleasure. It's good to see you again, Lily.
Thank you. You take care.
Of course. You too.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks, coming up, Democrats tried to slip some red flag provisions into the National Defense Authorization Act. We're going to talk about this. And the ACLU thinks apparently the Second Amendment is a threat to the First somehow. We'll talk with Mark Oliva with the National Shooting Sports Foundation next. Black Rifle Coffee Company is a veteran-owned coffee company that serves premium coffee to people who love America. They developed their explosive roast profiles with the same mission focus that they learned while serving our great nation. And with every purchase you make, Black Rifle Coffee gives back. In 2020, they donated over 6 million cups of coffee to veteran, law enforcement, and first responder causes. Their high-quality coffee beans are imported all the way from Colombia and Brazil and then carefully roasted at their facilities in Tennessee and Utah. They even have a signature roast called Lava Panther that's directly sourced from a small farm in Guatemala. So although the temperatures are cooling off, make sure that you keep enjoying the great outdoors fueled by Black Rifle Coffee. And the best way to do that is the Black Rifle Coffee Club. And when you join, your chosen brews roasted, packaged, and shipped free to your door. You also get special discounts, gain access to exclusive products, and a lot more. Purchase at blackriflecoffee.com/Dana. Use code Dana at checkout for 20% off of your purchase and your first coffee club order. You know how the federal government really does not care about enforcing borders, right? Apparently. We just let about 10 to 15,000 people enter the country illegally, unvetted, unvaxxed, just flying and bussing in on our dime onwards to the interior of the country. And so it goes. 20,000 border encounters happening a month. That's insane. 2 million this calendar year. That's up from 345,000 total illegal entrant encounters or so under the Trump administration in the final year of his term. That's a 5-fold increase. Even Barack Obama, that the media tries to hide, says that this is unsustainable if we're going to go on being a nation state. But you know who the Biden administration is vetting super hard? Americans trying to flee Afghanistan on private charters. Now, remember, these folks are only fleeing on private charters because of a botched exit that left Americans stranded in Afghanistan, courtesy of Joe Biden, who ignored all the advice on how to properly exit Afghanistan, according to General's testimony this week. So in any case, here's the latest on what happened. A nonprofit called Project Dynamo reported to Reuters that DHS, quote, will not allow a charter on an international flight into a U.S. port of entry, end quote. Now, who's on board? I mean, yeah, we totally should vet people as a matter of policy. That's why they've been going to third-party countries and being vetted before boarding the plane again and going to the United States. So this group is comprised of American citizens with passports and U.S. green card holders, as well as 6 Afghans who hold those U.S. special immigration visas and can prove that they work side by side with our military against terror factions. Their verification process is likely probably way more complete than some of the earlier groups that they've ever had in. Now, this group included 117 people, 59 of whom were children. They managed to escape the Taliban and get out of Kabul in a 787, but then DHS blocked their entry because it wasn't over the southern border. No, I mean, we're just assuming. According to government sources, it's all the result of confusion and incompetence. Really? We're shocked. It's our federal government, after all, run by a very confused and incompetent person. So apparently the group sat at Abu Dhabi airport for 14 hours, and those passengers, these ones, they're vetted, they're vaxxed, they have their documentation, but nope, can't land to the United States, even though they went to a third-party nation and were vetted before coming to the U.S., exactly like everyone else, many of whom didn't even have paperwork like these citizens and green card holders have. Meanwhile, 65,000 illegal entrants are working their way through Panama towards America as we speak. 1 out of 5 of these folks, according to DHS Mayorkas, are carrying, well, I mean, who knows? I mean, could you have coronavirus? So let's go ahead. Let's have a bus ticket to Hollywood. No vaccine required. Enjoy. And like I said, 10 to 15,000 Haitians were just dispersed into the interior and almost none sent back to countries of origin. We have no proof of vaccination. But we're in a pandemic and your rights have to be rolled back, but apparently this is okay. This administration screws up everything it touches, and now stopping actual Americans fleeing their lives from the Taliban from landing with 59 children. They've all been vetted. Elections have consequences indeed. So how fast can midterms get here? That does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, and don't bend the knee.